In the grim aftermath of World War II, the world witnessed a horrifying spectacle on July 4, 1946, atop Biskupia Gorka Hill, overlooking the Stutthof concentration camp. A chilling assembly of 200,000 gathered to witness the chilling end of former female guards. These women, once tasked with overseeing Stutthof's horrors, faced justice for their unspeakable crimes. Stutthof, situated east of Gdansk, was a place of unspeakable horrors. Local women, driven by greed or a sinister lust for power, answered the call of the SS within its walls. Executions were a grim daily ritual, claiming around 65,000 lives. Within the camp, these women were infamous for their heartless cruelty as agents of darkness. They reveled in sadistic acts, showing no remorse as they tortured and killed. Join us as we uncover the chilling tale of Stutthof's ruthless female guards and how they finally met their end. Stutthof concentration camp, established on September 2, 1939, was a place of immense suffering during World War II. It was the first Nazi camp established outside Germany. This camp played a horrifying role in the Nazis' plan to cleanse Poland. They targeted Poland's brightest minds, including politicians, religious leaders, and thinkers in West Prussia and Danzig. Even before invading Poland, the Nazis made lists of people to arrest. Stutthof was set up to imprison these individuals after the invasion. Originally, it was meant for civilians, but it soon expanded and became more like Dachau, where prisoners were forced into harsh labor and education. The first prisoners, about 150 of them, included Poles and Jews arrested early in the war. In just a few weeks, the number grew to around 6,000, mostly Poles. As the war continued, many more prisoners, especially Jews, were brought to Stutthof from other Nazi-occupied areas. During its years of operation, about 110,000 people were held in Stutthof. This included Jews from all over Europe, resistance fighters, Soviet prisoners, communists, psychiatric patients, and others. Stutthof had around 40 sub-camps that served different purposes, some producing goods for German companies, including those supporting the war. For example, there was an armaments factory and even an aircraft factory built within the camp. Conditions inside Stutthof were brutal. Disease was widespread and many prisoners died from starvation. Typhus epidemics in 1942 and 1944 killed thousands and led to terrible selections. During these selections, SS officers and doctors picked out sick or weak prisoners to be sent to a small gas chamber on site. Executions also happened at the camp, especially for Polish resistance fighters who were often shot. The gas chambers at Stutthof were chambers of unspeakable horror. Their use of Zyklon B gas to systematically murder prisoners began in June 1944, marking a gruesome chapter in the camp's history. These gas chambers bore witness to the agonizing deaths of approximately 4,000 prisoners, the majority of whom were Jewish women and children. The victims were herded into these chambers where the deadly gas filled the air, snuffing out their lives in a grotesque display of cruelty. The guards who oversaw Stutthof were known for their extreme sadism, and their actions within the camp are a harrowing testament to their cruelty. Jenny Wanda Barkman, although just 24 years old at the time of her execution, left a dark mark on Stutthof's history. She was notorious for her role in selecting prisoners for the gas chambers and for her relentless beatings of women prisoners that often led to their deaths. Barkman was but one example, as many other guards within Stutthof were equally infamous for their barbaric treatment of inmates. Brutal beatings and inhumane punishments were tragically common. The death toll within Stutthof was staggering, with approximately 65,000 prisoners losing their lives within its grim confines. This grim tally includes not only those who met their end in gas chambers, but also those who perished in other horrifying ways. Some prisoners faced a terrible fate, drowning in the boggy mud that permeated the camp's grounds. Camp doctors were also complicit in the horrors that unfolded. They administered lethal injections to injured and sick prisoners inside the camp's infirmary, contributing to the camp's grim mortality statistics. The darkest allegations even suggested that the SS used human fat from the corpses of prisoners to manufacture soap. This gruesome claim led to the execution of hundreds of prisoners, all for the macabre purpose of soap production. As the war drew to a close, the suffering within Stutthof did not abate. In late January 1945, a full-scale evacuation order was issued, leading to one of the most horrific episodes in the camp's history. Approximately 50,000 prisoners, the majority of whom were Jews, were forcibly removed from Stutthof. Among them, 5,000 were compelled to undertake a grueling march from the camp to the Baltic coast. Upon reaching the water's edge, they were forced to wade into the frigid sea, where SS guards indiscriminately opened fire with their machine guns, leaving a horrifying scene of carnage. Other groups of prisoners embarked on a nightmarish march toward eastern Germany, but their path was blocked by advancing Soviet forces. This forced them to endure a harrowing return to Stutthof. During the death march, they faced relentless mistreatment from the SS guards, received little to no sustenance, and suffered through the freezing winter conditions. Tragically, thousands succumbed to exhaustion, exposure, and brutality along the way. In the months that followed, the remaining prisoners were transported from the camp by sea. Once again, prisoners were thrown into the sea and shot by their captors. The brutal evacuation of Stutthof exacted a staggering toll, with an estimated 25,000 prisoners losing their lives during this horrific ordeal. It wasn't until May 9, 1945, that Stutthof experienced liberation. However, the liberators encountered only a small number of survivors, around 100 individuals who had managed to evade the grim fate that befell so many others during the death marches and evacuations. The series of trials, known as the Stutthof trials, were a critical effort to bring to justice the guards and officials responsible for the horrific crimes committed within the confines of Stutthof concentration camp. These trials, encompassing 4 separate proceedings, commenced in 1946 and concluded the following year. Despite the staggering number of around 2,000 SS staff who had worked at Stutthof, only 72 SS officers and 6 female overseers were brought to trial, underscoring the challenges in prosecuting those responsible for the camp's atrocities. The trials unfolded in Gdansk. The initial trial focused on the 6 women accused of being Aufscherens, female overseers at the camp. Among them were Jenny Wanda Barkman, Elizabeth Becker, Wanda Kloff, Paradies, Gerda Steinhoff, and Erna Beilhardt. The courtroom became a harrowing stage where witness statements and compelling evidence were presented. Shockingly, it was noted that the accused women, in particular, appeared disturbingly indifferent to the gravity of the trial. Jenny Barkman, in particular, exhibited a chilling demeanor, showing little regard for the gruesome evidence presented. Reports suggested she even seemed preoccupied with her appearance, at times flashing a smirk and even flirting with guards in the courtroom. Of the women on trial, Jenny Barkman, Elizabeth Becker, Wanda Kloff, Paradies, and Gerda Steinhoff were sentenced to death, while Erna Beilhardt received a 5-year prison sentence. Alongside the women, several men also faced the death penalty, all slated for execution on July 4, 1946. On this fateful day, the condemned were transported to the city of Gdansk, particularly to Biskupia Gorka, a prominent hill in the area. A massive crowd, estimated at around 200,000 people, had gathered near the gallows. These gallows were notably large, designed to accommodate multiple executions simultaneously, with some capable of holding up to 3 condemned individuals. Their considerable height ensured that the gathered crowd had a clear view of the grim proceedings. The executions commenced with Jenny Barkman. The women and men scheduled for execution were loaded onto trucks and positioned beneath the gallows. Jenny Barkman, attired in a simple dress, faced her final moments under the gallows at 5 p.m. Her arms and ankles were bound and a noose was placed around her neck. She stood facing the immense crowd as the truck suddenly drove away, leaving her hanging in front of the assembled witnesses. She dangled there, her hands and feet twitching as she struggled for breath. A shoe slipped from her foot, a grim testament to her agonizing ordeal before she finally went limp, succumbing to the noose. Barkman was the first of 11 individuals executed that day on the hill, and notably, the women were executed before the men. As the 5 women hung lifeless, the men were executed on the adjacent gallows. It was a chilling public spectacle, with a total of 11 lifeless bodies swaying from the towering gallows. For many who had witnessed these executions, it offered a small measure of retribution for the horrors endured within the Stutthof concentration camp. The suffering and loss of life within the camp were immense, and those who faced execution were held accountable for their barbaric treatment of prisoners. The women who met their end in this macabre display had played different roles within the camp, but they shared a commonality. They were willing participants in the widespread suffering and death, either by their own hands or by selecting victims for the gas chambers. Now, we've journeyed through the chilling annals of Stutthof concentration camp and the grim trials that followed. It's a stark reminder of the dark chapters in human history. But we'd like to know what you think. How do you perceive the atrocities that transpired at Stutthof camp? And what lessons can we draw from this haunting episode in our past? Please share your insights and thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more compelling episodes of military history. Together, let's continue to learn.